Hi everybody, welcome to Coffee with Christianna. It's July 11th and I'm here with Bridget from Cowgirlblues Yarns, and she is doing a trunk show here through Thursday, so be sure to stop by and say hi. So I have to ask because I'm sure people want to know.
Okay.
How did you come up with the name Cowgirlblues?
Yeah, so yes, people do often ask that question. I'm a big fan of the author Tom Robbins, and he wrote a book called Even Cowgirls Get the Blues. It's a very weird and quirky book, which I really enjoy. Don't ever watch the movie because it's terrible, but it's kind of about returning to a more natural way of life. And so I've struggled with depression on and off since I was a teenager, and so the blues is something I'm familiar with, but the cowgirl blues idea kind of was a bit more of a quirky, lighter way of thinking about that for me. And so yeah, there's a photograph of, I don't know if that'll show up, there's a photograph that was taken many years ago of me with some cows and the sea in the background, and yeah, I don't know, it kind of just all came together. So yeah.
So for anyone out there who's not familiar with Cowgirlblues, they are from Cape Town, South Africa, and I've never had the pleasure of going. So what's Cape Town like, and how does it kind of affect your dyeing process?
Yeah, so Cape Town it's a port city, very close to the southern tip of Africa, and it has a history as a trading city. The town, I guess, what it was then, the port was established in the mid-1600s when the Dutch East India Company was looking for a refueling station for their ships between Europe and the East. There were obviously indigenous people who lived there before settlers arrived, and so it's always been a mix of different peoples, and even the indigenous people who were there before settlers arrived, there were indigenous people from the East Coast and the West Coast who kind of met in those areas. So it's always been a mix of people and cultures in a very beautiful natural environment and pretty far south. And so I think how it influences the business, and particularly our colors, is from a business perspective. Although we're kind of at the southern tip of Africa, which seems very far away from Europe, from North America, we get a lot of people passing through, and that creates its own energy and interaction and interplay of ideas and cultures and things. And then also the light is it's kind of bright and clear, and I think it brings a vibrance to life and to the colors that we experience. And our climate's pretty warm, which I think also makes a huge difference to how we experience color and how we live. We're also a kind of melting pot of African cultures, which bring incredible vibrancy in terms of fabrics and textiles and food and all sorts of things. And so color is a really integral part of how we live. Yeah, and so I think our colors have a lightness and brightness that you perhaps don't necessarily find in places where it might be darker most of the year.
So how did you get started in the dyeing business? Was there a particular yarn that you liked that you wanted to start with, and then it kind of grew from there? Or?
Well, actually it started from the product. So my original idea was to make some product. We have a lot of merino wool in South Africa, and we're also the world's biggest exporter of mohair, or biggest producer of mohair and exporter. And so I really wanted to do something that could add more value to it in South Africa and then export it. And so my original idea was making scarves and shawls and selling them mostly to tourists, I guess. And I started dyeing on those already knitted products, and then also dyeing some of the yarns that we were making for those products. And and so it was kind of from there that people started saying, oh, we really like your colors that you're doing these scarves in, but can we have some yarn to make it ourselves? And I think probably the mohair silk yarn, do you want to pass me on those things? So this mohair silk yarn was one of the first and kind of most luxurious ones that I started working with. We were knitting some quite loose knit scarves, and so I have a soft spot for this particular yarn, and it takes the color so beautifully, very differently from a superwash merino, for example. But yeah, I really do love mohair yarns. And we've got a couple of different mohair blends. So
I know these colors, they're so saturated and beautiful.
Thank you.
I lost my train of thought there first.
That's okay.
I was so mesmerized by the yarn. So, how long have you been working with shops in the States? Did it kind of start out small and then grew out?
Yeah, so the States is really still quite a new market for us. Over the last, I don't know, COVID has kind of blurred my time frame. So when I think over the last 5 years, maybe it then is actually more like 6 or 7. We've had 1 or 2 stores that we've kind of done yarn for at different times, but it's really been since H&H Americas last year in June, when I came to Chicago for the show, that we've started to focus on the US market. So my original plan was in 2020 I was going to do a Vogue Knitting Live event in San Francisco in October. Obviously that did not happen. No. But what was amazing about that is when Virtual Vogue started, they contacted all of the businesses that had signed up to be vendors at those shows, and probably all the teachers as well. And so we got involved in those online shows in June 2020. And that was a really nice little intro to the US, because I was meeting knitters and crocheters directly on Zoom, and we were all getting comfortable with this crazy online world that it now seems so familiar. And so that was a really lovely introduction to people who were engaging in those Zoom sessions and then shopping on an online store. And that was almost a really helpful kind of market research process to understand a little bit more about how people knit or crochet, what kind of yarns people respond to, getting some feedback about what was different about our product from what they'd been seeing in the US, and also getting some contacts with stores. And then H&H Americas in June last year was a big step, and again this year. And I have 2 high school friends who live here in Colorado, one in Denver and one in Boulder, and so I had stopped by Longmont last year and contacted Gail, and then we spoke at the show again this year, and so that's how this has come about.
Yeah, that was fun. That was my first time at H&H. It was a little...
It's a crazy experience, right?
It was a very crazy experience,
Yeah.
so I feel a little more prepared for next time.
Yeah.
So I was wondering, too, if you could tell our community just the mission of Cowgirlblues and the fact that you employ a lot of women.
Yeah, so a huge part of what starting the business was about for me was finding a way to make a contribution to economic development in South Africa and to the empowerment of women. So that has been empowering myself, creating opportunities to empower people who are buying our products, but also particularly the women who work in the business. So we have crazy high unemployment in South Africa. Our official figures are very close to 50% unemployment. It's insane. And women have a really powerful role in communities, because if women are earning money, they'll take care of their families, their children, their extended families. And so a lot of what we do is the skills that you need are quite low tech. And so we can easily teach people the skills that they need. They don't necessarily have to have any tertiary education. We've got one or two people who don't have their high school diplomas, but in coming to work at Cowgirlblues, they've found a community of other people. They have learned a lot of skills. They have grown and moved up in the business, and the security of having a salary at the end of every month has changed people's lives, and that's amazing to be part of. And they, we couldn't dye all of this yarn without the team that's involved in that process, and so that's a really important part of what we do. And it's not just the job creation. A lot of it is also about building people's confidence. Our language of business at work at Cowgirlblues is English, but most of the people who work at Cowgirlblues are not native English speakers. And so even just getting comfortable communicating in another language has been a huge step for people, and whether they stay at working at Cowgirlblues or not, that is one of the most transferable skills they learn. So
it's amazing. Wow, that unemployment rate's
it's
scary.
terrifying. Yeah.
Oh goodness.
Yeah.
I can't think of anything else. Have I forgotten anything that you'd like everyone to know?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I'm trying to think what else is important to tell people. I mean, I guess if we move on to talking about the product a little bit, perhaps, we have a couple of different yarn bases, and we have merino and mohair yarns. And I think the one thing that I would like to talk about a little bit is the mohair yarns, because merino is quite familiar to people, and a lot of people are scared of mohair.
And they shouldn't be.
No, there is no need to be scared of mohair, and there are so many ways that you can, if it's something that you'd like to try and get a feel for, well, what is mohair all about and how do I work with it? There are different yarn bases. So there's the mohair silk, and there's our Aran single, which is a heavier weight yarn. There's the fluffy mohair, and mohair yarns combine really well with other yarns. So I knit a lot with the mohair silk combined with anything else. And
what I like to do is I like to take like a really stark white and combine it with a really, really bright color, and it changes the appearance of the yarn so much.
Completely. And so that's the other thing. So one is just being comfortable to experiment a little bit, and if you're not comfortable knitting with a mohair yarn on its own, put it together with something else. And then the same when it comes to color is that one of my favorite things is to put different yarn bases and colors together, and you can take any solid and mix it with a variegated. Two variegateds can start to be more complicated because you're not sure how they'll respond. But if you think of it as just like mixing colors, whether it's paints or whatever, if you add a softer color to a bright variegated, it's going to tone it down a little bit. If you add a brighter color, it's going to make things pop. So yeah.
I think I see a question. I love mohair, though I usually... Oh, hey Nancy. If we don't answer any of your questions live, I will go back through the chat line and make sure everyone gets an answer to any question you may have. So,
okay.
So, yeah, and it appears the mohair takes the color very, very nicely.
It does. It takes it very differently from merinos. So, especially the superwash merinos literally snatch the color straight out of the water, and so you can get very strong, very definite color, whereas the mohair tends to be a little more subtle. So if you look at those two yarns together, you can see the superwash over here is quite dark and definite, whereas the mohair is a little bit more a little bit softer and slightly more watercolory in terms of how the colors blend, but the intensity of the color can be absolutely amazing. And mohair has a beautiful luster or shine to it that is really interesting when you're bringing it into your projects.
I love the color names too. This one's called Another Hero, and this one's Tambourine Man. I know there's Cher, Celine Dion, Alanis Morissette.
Yeah, a little bit of a music theme there. So I find coming up with color names can be really difficult, and so I like 80s music. It's what I grew up with. and so finding names that relate to music. A lot of the variegated colors, the new ones we named after female musicians, so you'll find Adele and Cher, Celine Dion, and that is kind of an ode to those women. There will be I'm thinking there might need to be a Taylor Swift theme coming at some point, because she's an incredible young woman. It's a nice kind of way to kind of play around, and also it's so evocative of so much music that many of us can relate to. So
yeah, absolutely. So Bridget's trunk show will be here today, tomorrow, and Thursday, and Bridget will be here today and tomorrow, and we've got a whole bunch of samples for you to look at too, so you can kind of see the yarn in action. I love Tracy Chapman. Tracy Chapman's a great color.
Yes, it is. I'll show you. You can see the skein over here. So that's the skein of it on its own, but yeah, here it is knitted, combined with different color minis, and then this version, so this version has got the kid silk colors blended in there, so it gives you an idea of how those work.
So be sure to come by the shop and say hi to Bridget, and bring any questions you might have that we forgot to ask her this morning. And thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome.
Looking forward to having you here for the next couple days.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
We will see you guys later, and hopefully we will see you here. So have a lovely
Stop by. I hope to see you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.